Going in depth now this evening with Congressman Jeff Duncan. So, Congressman, thank you so much, as always, for joining us. Recently, you were tweeting about the Affordable Care Act and the failure that it's been. It was something that's mirroring what the former President Donald Trump, current GOP frontrunner, is also bringing up once again. Back in 2017, the Republican Party failed to repeal and replace Obamacare. Republicans had control of the House, the Senate, and the White House. They were unable to get anything passed and done. What makes this time different? And if Republicans are able to repeal or replace Obamacare in 2024, 25, what would be that plan in place?
Well, it's kind of interesting to see Senator Elizabeth Warren come out and raise concerns about the Affordable Care Act. Look, Americans know the Affordable Care Act is nothing short of unaffordable. It's driven up costs for health care and insurance premiums. Republicans did try to repeal that and reform it during the President Trump era. John McCain, unfortunately, didn't agree with President Trump and killed it on the Senate side. We had to use a budget reconciliation method to get it done, to get the votes over on the Senate side over their cloture hurdle. And at the end of the day, our efforts failed, but it doesn't hide the fact that Americans realize their insurance premiums have gone up, healthcare costs have gone up, and it's very unaffordable for Americans.
What would be the plan in place? And I think that was the top concern for so many people as Republicans tried to push the repeal or the skinny repeal. There was concern that there was no plan in place to replace Obamacare.
Well, it was a repeal and replace effort back when we tried it. It just nibbled around the edges of a lot of areas and kept some of the Affordable Care Act in place. But look, it looked at high-risk pools. It looked at insurance, the drivers of insurance costs and the drivers of health care costs. And really trying to work on that. That was so many years ago. The Republicans now need to realize that, you know, we need to look at community care centers for health care delivery services in communities that don't have, you know, regional hospitals. We've seen this consolidation of hospitals across the country. And at the end of the day, too, Americans realize that they have seen higher costs for health care and for insurance since the Obamacare era. And I guess Republicans are going to have to revisit that at some point in time and try to see what we can do to lower the health care costs, lower insurance premium costs, and revisit it. But we only control the House of Representatives right now. Chuck Schumer, the Democrats, control the Senate. Of course, Joe Biden's in the White House. And any effort we put forth now would be DOA in the Senate. And so we need to focus on winning the House, keeping the House a majority, winning the Senate, winning the White House, and really readdressing that in the next cycle.
Something else recently that you brought up was you signed a letter calling on the CEO of TikTok to stop terrorist propaganda and anti-Semitism. At what point will the federal government be able to step in and kind of put a restrainer on social media? Because a lot on Twitter as well. There's been concern about a lot of anti-Semitic rhetoric on Twitter.
Yeah, first off, you know, TikTok is owned by ByteDance, which is just an arm of the Chinese Communist Party. So it is a Communist Party-run organization. They harness data on our children and Americans. They use that to spread propaganda. We've seen just recently they use an algorithm pushing hashtag Free Palestine, and the algorithm pushed that out there. It was 946 million views recently over the hashtag Stand With Israel, which only got 55 million views. And so they're pushing this anti-Semitic propaganda out there. Really changing the minds of our young folks about Hamas and what Hamas stands for, or what Hamas has done in this attack against Israel, and what Israel's doing in defending itself. And it's an existential issue for Israel against Hamas and these terrorist attacks that we see that are funded by and propagated by Iran, which is the largest state sponsor of terrorism. And of course, the Biden administration gave them $6 billion. Maybe they can't use it directly, but it frees up $6 billion of other money they can use to fund terrorism. And so Iran is directly, you know, sponsoring the Houthis in Yemen, Hamas and Hezbollah and both Lebanon and in the Gaza Strip and West Bank. So there's a lot of things that TikTok is propagating out there. It's a national security risk when you think about it, from how it's influencing our children, how it's stealing data and storing that data, and who has access to that data.
You had mentioned how it's really infiltrating the minds of the youth in America. And I think one big concern, too, is that you saw the rounds of sympathizers with Osama bin Laden's letter to America. Has it gone too far down the rabbit hole for even lawmakers, government officials to step in and try to restrain what's happening on social media?
Absolutely. It's a national security threat. The fact that the Osama bin Laden letter was actually put out there, a way for him to justify his attack that killed 3,000 Americans is just wrong. And it's really brainwashing our younger generation that maybe these radical Islamic groups aren't bad, that Hamas or Hezbollah or Iran even aren't bad actors. But let me tell you, they are bad actors. And for TikTok to be supporting that and to be pushing things like the hashtag Free Palestine is just wrong. You know, I'd rather see these platforms educate Americans and people around the world about what these terrorist groups are doing, the history of the region there with Israel, the history of Iran and terrorism toward America going all the way back to the hostage crisis in the late 70s. So these are things I would love to see a platform do. Instead, they're brainwashing American youth. They are pushing misinformation, disinformation, and we saw this during the Cold War with the Russians and disinformation. We're seeing it now with China via TikTok, and it's really supporting these groups like Iran and Hezbollah and Hamas and other terrorist organizations like ISIS and Al Qaeda are utilizing their platform as well to try to justify their existence and what they do.
But are there any actions that you can take, that lawmakers on Capitol Hill can take in restraining this a little bit?
Well, we've had hearings in the Energy and Commerce Committee, which I serve on, really delving into TikTok. Now the next action is just to ban it like many European countries have done. They've banned TikTok within their borders. I think it's time for America to look at that as well.
Okay, Congressman Duncan, thank you so much as always.
You're welcome.